Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session entitled Survive to Thrive, Sustaining Professional Learning During COVID-19. My name is Laura Bray, and I'm the Pennsylvania State Personnel Development Grant, or SPDIG Director. Today, I will be presenting with Jackie Lister and Tracy Ficca, who serve as state leads on this project. Although not here today, I would also like to thank Dr. Natalie Sokol and Becky Fogel and all of our coaches, LEA teams, families, and students for their work on P2G. This work is truly a team effort. During this presentation, we will discuss how our SPDIG project, Middle School Success, the Path to Graduation, or rather P2G, was able to successfully sustain professional learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. We will share with you the key components that enabled us to maneuver during these uncertain times. This work was developed for the 2021 OSEP conference. However, the content of our presentation does not necessarily represent the policy of the Department of Education, and you should not assume that it is endorsed by the federal government. As we begin our discussion on sustaining professional learning during the pandemic, it is important to start by describing the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, or PATN. PATN assists the Pennsylvania Bureau of Special Education by providing a full array of professional development and technical assistance targeted to improving students' results across the Commonwealth. PATN is composed of 3 regionally located offices, which support 29 intermediate units across the state. PATN is an essential component of the work of P2G, as its partnership with 29 intermediate units in Pennsylvania allows for the implementation of systematic and sustainable statewide professional development. The PATN consultants serve as coaches as well as lead professional learning communities. A key to our success during COVID-19 was infrastructure that was already in place due to the PATN system. Specifically, how PATN has offices that are regionally located and staffed, how PATN has developed trusting and ongoing relationships with a regionally located school district, as well as how the PATN system has experience using technology to support school districts across the state using platforms such as Zoom, Padlets, and online modules. And most importantly, how PATN has a network of highly experienced and accomplished professional coaches who were ready to support schools in the work of P2G throughout the pandemic. I cannot emphasize enough the importance that the PATN infrastructure had in enabling our project to successfully continue throughout the pandemic. Here is a brief description of the PATN mission, which is to support the work of the Bureau of Special Education. PATN is committed to ensuring that all students are instructed within the least restrictive environment. Another crucial component to the success of P2G during the pandemic was Pennsylvania's commitment to family engagement. Our statewide family network, Families to the Max, or F2Max, is comprised of hundreds of dedicated family members, educational professionals, related service providers, community members, and young adults with disabilities. F2Max's ongoing involvement with P2G throughout the pandemic enabled us to be responsive to the needs of families across the Commonwealth. Given that the statewide family network was already established, meeting regularly, and utilizing technology before the pandemic, it enabled it to play a central role in the work of P2G as we transition to all virtual interactions. Now that I've highlighted some of the key infrastructure elements that were in place before the pandemic, let us now discuss other key practices that enabled our SPDIG to maintain professional learning during these challenging times. To start with, I will provide a brief background on our SPDIG project, Middle School Success, the Path to Graduation, or P2G. The purpose of P2G is to build LEA's capacity to address the academic, social, and behavioral needs of middle school students receiving emotional and behavioral services, and to ensure that all Pennsylvania students graduate from high school, college, and career ready. Research has shown that early indicators of dropout can be identified in the middle school years through the ABCs, or rather attendance, behavior, and classroom performance. Therefore, the goal of P2G is to decrease dropout for students with emotional behavior disorders by increasing daily attendance, decreasing behavior incidents, and increasing course performance. Once a school joins our P2G project, they are provided with ongoing professional learning on how to implement an early warning system, to interpret data to identify students at risk using the ABC data, develop action plans, and implement individual and systematic research-based interventions. These interventions include strategic instruction model, and this goes by SIM. It's a comprehensive research validated approach to adolescent literacy. Check and Connect is an intervention used with K-12 students who show warning signs of disengagement and are at risk of dropping out. And Transition Discoveries, which is an approach to systemic secondary transition change based on action research out of the George Washington University. Based upon implementation science, P2G uses a cascading model in which statewide patent consultants train and work with IU internal coaches, which then work with and train LEA internal coaches. I will now pass the presentation off to Jackie Lister, who will continue to discuss the key practices that allowed us to sustain professional learning during the pandemic.
So what happened during COVID? Well, as you've all had this shared common experience of COVID, there's no need to go into the details. In fact, I think the less said about that, the better. Some things that may have been somewhat unique in Pennsylvania is that we are a commonwealth, with each LEA making decisions independently. Some schools were able to get virtual options up and running within a few weeks, while others took months. This new reality of instruction design and delivery changed frequently within LEAs, from fully virtual to hybrid and fully in person, and then back again, all within a week. We knew that if we were to continue to provide the supports offered through P2G, that everything that wasn't already virtual would need to be virtual. We were in the midst of what was to be our peak recruiting year, and our LEAs were, of course, struggling with what some thought was something extra. How in the world could we expect them to add on the work of a SPDIG to the pandemic chaos? As I said, 2021 was expected to be our peak year for adding new LEA teams to the grant. We planned for 29 new teams to be added. We didn't know how schools would respond to coming to a project during COVID, and we anticipated that getting teams to respond would be almost impossible. But our messaging to LEAs was clear. Your students with emotional behavior challenges are the ones who are most at risk in a normal school environment. How much more do they need this support at a time like this? We remained clear that P2G is about not taking, but giving. That is to say, giving more support. The only take was about data, and we would help with data. We also showed how P2G fit into their existing systems and how it would be a support for the students who are most at risk during this time. At the regional level, we have a shared vision with the Pennsylvania Intermediate Unit Association, or PAIU. At their statewide meetings, the success of P2G was already being shared by teams who were in the project. We were also sharing through social media. We were at regional intermediate unit leadership meetings. And then within our system at places such as our principals learning environment and our Pennsylvania Fellowship designed for professional learning for special education leaders. These were all virtual this year as well. We also learned from COVID that we could effectively include some of our regional center-based schools. These were first thought to be an awkward match for P2G because of data constraints. We made better use of communicating through social media. These links will be provided for you. We use podcasts, Doodly, Facebook, Twitter. We hope to get 29, and we got 30 new teams during COVID. Earlier, Laura mentioned that the infrastructure already in place in terms of our system of professional development was there and up and running, but we also have a crack tech team. And we had been using and familiar with the tools listed on the screen to provide professional learning to our participants. We have created 3 smaller communities: our administrator community, our coaching community, and our IHE community. Given the heavy load most are carrying, we learned from our previous FDIG that administrators do want to work together, but they have limited time to do that. So our administrator community, which functions similar to a PLC, was already using Schoology and Zoom to meet the needs of our participants. The coaching community was using a hybrid approach with both Zoom and in-person learning. During COVID, Schoology was added to the mix to provide deeper learning with a blend of synchronous learning to enrich and practice learned skills. Our Institutes of Higher Education, or IHE community, was also a nice surprise for us during COVID. This was their first year participating in the grant. We anticipated 3 IHEs to enter into the work of P2G this year, and currently 11 are working together virtually. Community supports were primarily virtual. Microsoft Teams and Google Teams provided options for sharing information. Padlet was used extensively as both a means to share information and gather resources desperately needed by our teams. As teams were meeting, we recognized that there was a tremendous stretch for them, but these communities were able to come together to support each other beyond the work of P2G. Real conversations about how folks were doing through the pandemic, or what instructional models were working to support students with EBD and beyond. It became more than what we expected. Our experience is serving as a model for continued support in schools. The schools we're working with generalized learning well, and they went beyond the P2G population. We provided tools, support, and the opportunity to meet with colleagues. Our P2G consultants supported in many ways beyond the grant. What about data collection? Well, once again, we did have a virtual statewide data collection system in place for the purposes of P2G. And as a requirement of the grant, teams were already implementing an early warning system. So the system itself could function virtually, but many teams struggled with actually collecting attendance data when they didn't have an idea about what attendance looked like in this new virtual world. They also had difficulty with collecting grades for students, and behavior data looked completely different in the virtual setting. Our consultants work with LEA teams to provide flexibility with data collection. For example, rather than looking at 4th quarter grades and end of year grades, we only asked for end of year grades, which seemed to work for everyone. Our consultants share the load of entering data by offering to help LEAs to complete that task. LEAs had challenges with attendance and behavior as well. Through the previously mentioned communities, teams were able to speak directly with one another about creative solutions. Don't get me wrong, gaps did happen, but we were able to support and work through them. As Laura mentioned previously, P2G offers participating teams training and technical assistance in these 3 research-based interventions. National trainers from the University of Minnesota who support Check and Connect listened carefully to the needs of Pennsylvania teams. The system already provided access to some virtual tools, but not virtual training. Nearly all P2G teams chose to participate in Check and Connect implementation. We had a system of trained trainers, but no way of getting that training out to our school personnel. It took some time, but the national team answered with virtual training options and support materials, as well as direct support to our Pennsylvania trainers. Additionally, through the coaching community, teams were able to share how they were continuing to provide virtual mentoring for students throughout the pandemic. Many have continued to offer this successful option for students as they've returned to in-person learning. Now looking at SIM, we were still in the process of certifying our statewide coaches in 7 different routines and strategies. SIM, as you may be aware, has been around for quite a few years and predated virtual learning. Many of those in the learning process did not have access to the print manuals since they left their offices, and did not have access to students to practice the learned information. Although our national trainers tried, there was very limited access to digital material. This slowed the process of our implementation of SIM across the state, but creative changes were offered to provide options to support virtual learning for our SIM coaches. Transition Discoveries moved to an entirely virtual implementation. The next slide shows one such example. As part of the implementation of Transition Discoveries, teams come together and create a system for action planning. They first discover what they have, dream what they want to have, and then deliver on 1 or 2 outcomes. This was originally planned to be a highly active community event, completed in a live format with poster boards and sticky notes and lots of yarn and string. But the TD team discovered Padlet as a system to use virtually, and now they've made this their first choice option for all teams who are implementing. Once again, we don't need to fill you in on all that was happening in our world as we navigated the pandemic. Students, families, and professionals were grappling with the trauma of the times. We knew that our project needed to meet the needs of our team and infuse equity into all that we were offering. Our implementers connected teams with national and state level information supports around equity and helping students to continue to learn and thrive in this most difficult time. Our communities, the administrator, coaching, and IHE communities, all took the task to heart and supported each other with up-to-date resources shared through a Padlet. This Padlet will be shared with you in the resources section. Our system provided a wide variety of just-in-time support, which went way beyond the grant. We walked a tightrope to find a balance with what LEAs were dealing with as a result of COVID and the commitments of the grant. Every LEA implemented differently, different attendance policies, different grading policies. We value our relationships at the local level, and each team needed unique supports along the way. We understood this, even more so during COVID, and will continue to keep our supports in place. The local context will change with the return to normal, but we will remain engaged. As they follow their own data, it may suggest certain needs, increased behavior, or more mental health challenges, or more challenges around attendance. Middle school students are at high risk for developing challenges in this area. When we work with our local teams, we are enabling them to be able to sustain beyond the grant. Sustainability is our end game. We want them to adapt this for their local needs moving forward to support children who are at the highest risk for dropping out. Attending to these risk factors at the middle school level, we hope will lead to higher success with graduation. Our first set of teams has completed the formal professional learning, and they are exiting. They are all moving the programs forward, and many have moved this work to the high school level. Our statewide system will be able to continue to support them moving forward. Contact information for the presenters today are listed on this slide. We have also compiled resources on a Padlet for your use at this tiny URL link. Thank you so much for joining us today.